On today's question of faith, what is an indulgence and why should I want one? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I am Deacon Mike Hayes. I am the Director of Young Adult Ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ference, the Vicar for Evangelization.
And I am Mary Fugate, the Executive Assistant for Parish Life.
Welcome back to the show, Mary.
Thank you.
It's been a little while, no?
October.
Oh,
was
okay.
the last time we did the Halloween episode.
Yeah,
right.
that was a good one. That was a good one.
Indeed.
So, Mary has a degree in theology from the Catholic University of America, and it's part of my job to make sure that she receives intellectually stimulating work, because some of her job is just practical things. And we're in the middle of this Jubilee year. We had another Mary on last week, Mary Rich, and we talked about the Jubilee year, and we mentioned indulgences, and we said we would have a show particularly on indulgences because that is a big part of the Jubilee year, but can often confuse people or make people have, bad vibes about Catholics because maybe they don't know what indulgences are. So this show, we're going to try to answer that question. Like, what is an indulgence? Why should I want one? I should say, too, that last week I mentioned this book by John Bergsma called Jesus and the Jubilee, and he's a former Protestant, and we reviewed his chapter in preparation for this podcast, so maybe we can, I marked up my book today, but that I found that to be helpful. But anyway, Mary, what is an indulgence? Can you give us a basic understanding?
An indulgence is a special grace that removes temporal punishment from sin.
Okay, so now we have to figure out what temporal punishment is and what it's not. And isn't it the case that for Catholics, to have sin removed, the normal way is first baptism and then through the Sacrament of Reconciliation, particularly for mortal sin.
Right.
But that's normally what happens. That's what removes guilt. But you just used a new term, temporal punishment. So what's the difference between guilt and temporal punishment?
So guilt is the culpability that we have for sin. So when we're forgiven in the Sacrament of Confession, God forgives us and removes that guilt, the guilt that we hold for sin. So it's like, it's almost as if we never committed that sin.
Okay, so let's say someone, does tarot cards or cheats on their spouse or steals something or murders somebody.
Right.
They go to confession.
And then they're forgiven of that sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yet,
sin still causes disorder and chaos in our lives, and there are still negative effects of sin.
So it still has an effect on us. Yeah.
Right, despite the forgiveness. So you mentioned adultery, for example. If a wife is unfaithful and the husband forgives his wife, that forgiveness is unconditional. There's not a condition for that forgiveness.
Right.
Yet there's still damage done to that relationship, and the husband is reaching out his hand to the wife to forgive her, and the wife has to reach back and make amends and purify herself so that they can reach that union that they once had.
Right.
So it's a very incarnational understanding of the human person, that it's not magic, because although one is forgiven, the effects of that sin still remain, maybe particularly in one's habit or one's character, and needs to be pulled out. Bergsma uses the example of
the car,
a teenage. You want to tell it?
Yeah, sure. I think
it's helpful.
He was telling, let's say you're a teenage boy and you decide to take your father's car out for a joyride, and you want to really see what it can do, and you turn the corner and you kind of swipe the car next to you and damage the car next to you, and then you're all out of sorts and you drive the car into a ditch. And, now your car is completely damaged. There's another car that's completely damaged, and for some reason, the father and the person who owns the car forgives you for what you've done, but the cars are still all marked up and they have to be repaired, and there's all those kinds of things, and so the indulgence is like repairing the car afterwards. Yeah,
it's a nice example. And when people hear that, or the one that Mary just gave, okay, that makes sense. So this is the temporal punishment that works out. How about and before we started recording, I said to Mary, I said, what are you going to say about indulgences? What did you say?
I said, you're going to suffer one way or the other.
Yeah. So, and what did you mean by that?
So the temporal punishment that we're talking about is the temporal punishment that we undergo in purgatory. So we're either going to suffer in this life and make amends for the sins that we've committed, or once we die, we'll suffer in purgatory and enter that stage of purification so that we can be in union with God.
Yeah. So Bergsma says in here, and he quotes somebody saying, it's like, the wasted time in purgatory, like work on this stuff here. And the church then affords us these things called indulgences to help us with that. So it really is a spiritual principle, but because we're both a body and soul, it works on our humanity too. Mm-hmm. So it heals our humanity, and this is the power of what grace does. And it makes a lot of sense in that way. So if you have struggled with a particular sin in the past and you go to confession for it, but you're still feeling like, man, I don't feel whole. I'm not fully healed. Then perhaps like working for one of these indulgences and going through the effort of visiting one of the holy sites or spending time studying scripture or praying a family rosary. We'll get into like how you do these things could be really helpful. And trusting that the church has an answer to that longing, like, all right, I've done this. And he uses an example in the book too. Back in his Protestant days, someone would say, I've taken Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, but man, okay, you've got that, but you still have a lot of habits that you had that used to take your life one way, and you need some healing there. So an indulgence is one of the ways to help that. Okay, so how do I get one? Let's get in the practicalities. Mary, you have?
Well, there are lots of ways to obtain an indulgence.
You talk like NPR lady. I think it's funny.
There are the usual conditions for an indulgence that goes along with any activity that you do to obtain an indulgence. Mm-hmm. So the usual conditions would be go to confession, receive the Eucharist, pray for the intentions of the Holy Father. And is there one more?
And a spirit detached from sin.
Yes, the spirit detached from sin, right. Which we can get into that if we want to. But
yeah, so spirit detached from sin, confession as soon as possible, Eucharistic communion as soon as possible, prayer for the Holy Father's intentions. And normally you have an 8-day window to go to confession, right. But the Holy Father extended it to 20 days.
20 days, yes.
He is such a Pope of mercy, spread it out. I actually was in New York City this past weekend with 2 priest buddies. I go every year for my birthday, and we visited the shrine of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. Is that
Inwood in Manhattan?
That is it's northern Manhattan, so it's almost
the upper part of Manhattan. It's the very top of Manhattan. So
it's right by the cloisters.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you went any farther, you'd technically be in the Bronx.
In the Bronx, okay.
Or Yonkers, even if you went even further than that.
I see.
So yeah.
So I went there, and I'm going to confession on tomorrow because I have spiritual direction and confession tomorrow. So I'll complete this, and I have mass every day. So hopefully this will be good, and I can receive an indulgence. Go on, Mary. You have something else?
I was just going to talk about the other activities that you can do. So in John Bergsma's book, he lists 4 easy works. Those are 30 minutes reading the Bible, 30 minutes before the Blessed Sacrament, praying the Stations of the Cross before properly blessed stations. That would be like in a church or a shrine. Yeah,
they're in every church.
And then praying the rosary in a group of 2 or more persons with the mysteries announced.
And before a crucifix.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
But there's a crucifix on almost every rosary, unless your rosary is broken, so you're good.
And then for the Jubilee in particular, we have these Jubilee sites. And so you can make a pilgrimage to one of those. You can make a pilgrimage to Rome. At any time, you can make any sort of pilgrimage and obtain one of these indulgences.
Our good friends Lynette Cisneros and Kayla Gill designed these beautiful Pilgrims of Hope passports that are I think they're at every parish now. I have to drop off the one at Ashland, and I'm heading there next week. But you can visit all 11 sites. You only need to do one, but St. Edward Parish, Ashland, Cathedral here in Cleveland, St. Mary, Chardon, Immaculate Conception, Madison, Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Lorraine, St. Colette, Brunswick, Queen of Heaven, Uniontown, Peter and Paul Doylestown, and then 3 shrines, Our Lady of Lourdes in Euclid, Queen of Holy Rosary, Parma Heights, and St. Anne Shrine in Highland Heights. So then you get a little stamp, and you can have your passport stamped, and you could get all 11, and you've got a year to do it, which is pretty cool.
There you go. I'm going to try to go to all 11, I think.
I am too.
When the weather gets a little better, I think.
During Lent, my goal is to give a talk at all 8 parishes on the Jubilee and Bishop Malesik's new pastoral letter. And then what I want to do at these is maybe lead a rosary at each of the Marian shrines, and maybe in different languages. Even if I don't lead, I can only do a few languages.
Yeah. I was looking to see how far away the sites were from each other, because I was thinking of maybe trying to do a walking pilgrimage between all of them, but and I would probably break it up, like Ashland and St. Peter and Paul and Queen of Heaven. Like, you could do all of those in a very long day, if you wanted to. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll do those 3 one day, and then maybe I'll do a couple others the other day, and then see what's left over.
What if we do the Jubilee Challenge? That if you do all 11 in one day, you get a piece of honey, a piece of chocolate dipped in honey or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. What else do we need to talk about in terms of these jubilees? Oh, the two types of indulgences. Mary, can you make a distinction?
So there are partial indulgences and plenary indulgences. So they're pretty self-explanatory. A partial indulgence removes only a part of the punishment due to sin, whereas plenary indulgence would remove the entirety of your punishment that you've incurred, up to that point in life.
Yeah. I'm reading a book, rereading it now from my book club. It's called The Relentless Something of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
Oh, yeah.
It's a red book. It's good. And in there, he quotes some guy who says something so simple, but it's stuck with me, and it leads to this punishment thing. Because sometimes we could think, oh, God's just out to punish us. It's not that at all. It's that when you go against the grain, you get splinters. That's how he says it. So it's kind of respecting how things are. Reality is how God has created the world and his commands. When you go against them, the punishment is built in because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And most of us realize that anyway, even if we're like, I want to be a little rebellious. But like, man, that actually wasn't good for me. That wasn't helpful for me. So the punishment is built in. And what the church wants to do is say, yeah, it is. Your Sacrament of Confession absolves you from sin, but those effects that remain there can be worked on in other ways. And one of those ways is through these indulgences. So I have one final question. I didn't tell you about this because I wanted to kind of do it live. But what do you think about, so this is the grace side of things, but how about on the human side? What do you think about therapy? Like, let's say someone was struggling with anger or pride or infidelity or these things. Should they get the indulgence, or do you think they should go the route of therapy?
Probably both.
I would say both. Because the indulgence, would remove the temporal punishment, but you could still be afflicted mentally, emotionally by whatever habit you've built up or whatever sin has entered your life.
Addictions,
Right, and so talking to a qualified professional could help you work through that.
That's what I thought too. I was hoping you'd say that. I think it's a great iteration of the both and. It's faith and reason together. It's humanity and spirituality together. These things are not in contradiction to each other. Yeah. So work with a good therapist, and also go visit a holy pilgrimage site, make a holy hour, pray a rosary.
And just by the same token, I would say, this is what I was going to bring up, was that just because you've received some remittance of the temporal punishment doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and make amends to someone that you've wronged either.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That's sort of a cheap grace, right? It's like, okay, I went and confessed my sins and now I'm good, but I'm not going to apologize to the person who I was wronged.
Yeah, the grace that flows out of the sacramental life of the church is meant to heal not just the one receiving it, but when you go out.
Right.
It's similar that at Mass, go and announce the gospel of the Lord. So the graces received are also to be shared,
Right.
as you make your way out in the world.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. And gives you the grace to go and ask someone for their forgiveness on top of it then.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Jubilee? Anything else that we missed here?
One other particular thing about indulgences is that they can be applied to the souls in purgatory.
Oh, yeah, we forgot that.
They're not just for yourself, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And Mary, although she's much more high culture than I am, she still likes low culture a little bit, and so do I, and so does Deacon Mike. And so I often will remember like Elvis Presley or David Bowie, or if there's a celebrity that dies, I'll often offer a mass for that person because everyone else is like, oh, I miss them so much. Well, I do too, but I want them to go to the promised land. And so perhaps my prayers or an offering of an indulgence could help someone who's suffering. Of course, we do it for our family and friends too. But maybe those that are just thought of as celebrity or famous, but no one ever prays for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Do you have anybody you pray for who's Mary, or no? Have you ever prayed for a celebrity who died?
I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of specifics, but yeah, I have.
This week I've been praying for Jimmy Carter.
Oh, yeah.
Former president who died, who I've had two experiences with. Actually, I interviewed him for Busted
Really?
Halo.
Oh, wow.
I'll put the link in the show notes. It was an interesting interview that we did with him on one of his books. On the phone, we did it.
Okay,
And,
still.
Then when I was a little kid, his wife came through Yonkers, and I guess it was a campaign swing or something, and I met her. And I have a nice picture of me and Rosalind together. So
I have a good friend from Georgia who went to she's actually my book club and missed book club that night because she went to his wake. But as a proud Georgia daughter, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Now, we here in Ohio have 8 dead presidents, I think. I don't know how many
Yeah, I
Georgia
think that's
has,
right,
but,
yeah. And we're heavy-hearted here this week at the Diocese HQ with our HR director, Miriam Blakely, passed this week.
Yeah.
So we have her wake today and her funeral tomorrow. So maybe we'll do something for her this week.
She was a very good and holy woman. She suffered in her own life, and particularly with their cancer near the end, but she was the head of HR. The priests in the diocese loved her, which is rare that you find all the priests raving about someone who works downtown, but she was a good woman who was smart and supportive and fun. I was telling Mary the other day that when Mary applied for her job, I was told that we normally don't hire right out of college because she was 22. And Mary Ann says, well, who do you want? And I said, I want Mary Benino because she's the best, candidate for the job. And she goes, hire who you want. So anyway,
there you go.
Funeral mass tomorrow.
She hired me. She was on the team that hired me. Her, Lynette Cisneros, Sister Rita Mary Harwood, and Father Rich Samiti.
Really?
We're the hiring team.
Rich was in my youth group at the time. Well, not at the time. Rich was in my youth group when he was a teenager. But
back in the day is what you meant to say, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. So rest in peace, Marianne. It was she was just a great person to get to know and be a colleague with.
Yeah.
So we'll pray for people and offer an indulgence for them. Actually, the Pope made the new rule also now that you can get 2 in one day as long as you apply one to someone else.
Yes,
so you could receive communion twice in a day, but it has to, I really like that. I think that's a great way to be generous, and it's cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great. So why don't we go to Lord's Shrine for our church search this week? And when was the last time you were there? I haven't been there in a while.
Oh, probably 3 months ago. Now, I used to go there weekly because the seminary faculty, the priest faculty, staff them sacramentally. They have Mass there every day at 7 a.m. It's 5:15, I think, or 5 o'clock on Tuesdays. And then they have 2 Masses on Sundays. And in the summertime, those Masses are outdoors. And so it's a big shrine. It's like a tribute to Lourdes in France. They have the Stations of the Cross. They have pancake breakfasts. It's the Trinitarian sisters who run it. I think Trinitarian sisters or Mercedarian sisters. No, I think they're Sisters of the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
SOLT. And it's right in the middle of Euclid, right off Euclid Avenue. Have you been there, Mary, or no?
I have not.
Oh, you and
like
Ben
it.
need to
Yeah.
go on a
Yeah.
You know what we should do? Because
Perfect time.
Mary likes the Latin Mass. We should host a Latin rosary at one of these shrines because we're going to do one in Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, and English, probably Italian. So we should do that.
That's an idea.
Have you ever prayed the rosary in Latin?
I do not know all the prayers in Latin, but
There's only two. It's Our Father.
Well, I mean, I
all
don't
pretty
know
glory
them
be.
in
I'm
just
Latin.
kidding.
Mysteries.
Yeah. I can read them. You know, before, this is funny. When I was in Rome, before every papal mass, they prayed the rosary in Latin. And part of it was to pray the rosary in Latin. The other part, I think, was also human, just to calm the crowd down.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But that was when I practiced my Latin, like before any canonization mass. So
Interesting.
The universal language of the church.
it is. Yeah. I wish I was better at it. But anyway,
Alas.
we all have our gifts.
Yes, languages are often everybody's Waterloo at times, including mine. Anyway, someone who does a great job with language is our good friend Dan First over at Briefcase Marketing.
Oh, yeah. He does well with digital languages in particular. So Briefcase Marketing creates marketing for your church or church-based ministry that inspires action and delivers results.
They will clarify your message to help you get the right audience. They'll streamline your website to convert visitors into parishioners, volunteers, donors. They'll help create consistency to build trust and deepen relationships across all of your marketing platforms. That's your social media, your email, your ads, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and if you need proof, Briefcase Marketing gets great Google reviews. They've done superb work with our friends at Theology of the Body Cleveland, St. John Cantius, and Tremont.
That website's so good.
And we'll put those samples out. Now, Mary, you are the executive assistant for Parish Life. Have you ever come across a poorly designed parish website?
I have. I won't name any names, but
It's disappointing.
they
isn't it?
are out there.
Especially if you're younger. Like, the first place you go is not the church bulletin. You want to see the website, and if it doesn't look good, you know, maybe you turn off to what they have there, even if the parish is good.
So Mary, if someone calls and you see they have a bad website, now you could say, hey, do me a favor, call Dan First, have him
Yes.
look at your website.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you want to call Dan First or text him, you could do so at 308-627-1262. And our pal, Dan First, will take good care of you at Briefcase Marketing.
That's briefcase.marketing. We'll put all that in the show notes. Fix your website already. You're already behind. Let's take a look at the readings, back in the OT.
Hold on, I want to say something else about the Jubilee and Briefcase Marketing.
yeah, go ahead.
It's the Jubilee year. It's a time for renewal. So if you've been saying, wow, maybe it's time to renew something, how about renewing your parish website?
There you go. Perfect.
Man, are we good at that. This is our first sponsor that we've had, so yeah, anyway.
Yeah, that'll be good. Good job. Jubilee. Market. Do it now. All right, back in the OT, ordinary time.
Yeah, it's nice to be in green again.
Yeah, exactly. It's not easy being green.
It's none of my business.
We're in the Gospel of John this week at the wedding feast of Cana. I'm preaching this weekend also.
You are?
I am.
Well, what are you going to do? What's your big
Well,
idea?
one of the things I have not planned this out just yet, but one of the things I thought I might talk about is at my own wedding. So I may have told this story before, but Marion and I had wedding favors that were M&Ms because we're Mike and Marion, and they were lavender because that's her favorite color. And we made them ourselves. We put M&Ms in these little tool bags, and we had one for every couple, and we were going to put them all out on the table. And because I'm somewhat organized, I brought all these things down along with several other items for the wedding to the restaurant we were having our reception at. And they took our M&Ms and they put them into a cabinet down in the kitchen somewhere. And they had a really humid day, and so the chocolate ended up getting overrun by ants.
Oh.
Which ended up going all through the restaurant 3 days before our wedding. And so I know what it's like to have a disaster at a wedding where you're like, okay, now what do we do with all of our guests and everything else, and do we have to go somewhere else? And thankfully, the restaurant did kind of fix everything. They went out and got different M&Ms for us, and we had more M&Ms than we knew what to do with at that point. They fumigated the whole restaurant, and it was fine. And the day ended up being exactly as we had planned it to be, and it was really wonderful. And people still kind of talk about our wedding for some reason. It was like one of the family weddings that people continue to talk about. It was a really good time. And so my thought on that is, you have to care about the ordinary things sometimes, and that's what Jesus does here, is he cares about the ordinary things. Not exactly ants in the chocolate, but wine was a staple. If you ran out of wine, it was like running out of food. It was really bad.
Well, it's also running out of wine, and you're at a party, and you want to be drinking and celebrating, so...
And so there's those kinds of things. God cares about your ordinary things. Where will God be when your wine runs out?
Yep.
That's the idea.
Mary, any thoughts?
Well, Mary brings all of our needs to Jesus.
Also.
That's what she does here at the wedding feast at Cana, and that's what she does eternally for us in heaven.
Yeah. In the bishop's new pastoral letter, there's a really beautiful prayer at the end of it, and I think it alludes to this scripture passage of Cana. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. So I have some friends who suggested that I should ask the Lord to put a word on my heart for the year, and I did at the beginning of the year, and I was actually with Father Brian Stacy, who's a Capuchin, and I felt we were on our way to Mass in Columbus at St. Thomas the Apostle Parish, and I felt like I had the word on my heart, and I said, okay, Lord, if this is the word you want, when Stacy's preaching, Father Brian Stacy, have him say this word one more time to confirm it. And 3 times in his homily, he used the word ponder. And Mary pondered these things in her heart. Now, she pondered it earlier on when she gave birth to Jesus and the shepherds came. But here, I think there's, maybe it's not, is it here? Did I just read it or did I not read it? But when these things happen, she ponders them. And so that's like my Marian spirituality is, oh, well, here we go again. So maybe the word isn't there, but I still like the notion that she reacts to things and then she has to kind of ponder what just happened in her heart. So something Marian that way.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the scene of this in The Chosen, it's actually a rather good one, I think.
It's excellent. Yeah. It's good.
All right. So get your indulgences.
Yeah. And then be able to explain them to other people too, because it's helpful. And I think when you take the time to think through it, that makes sense. It's just the word, I think, turns people off sometimes.
And we don't sell these anymore. We should have said that at the top. Was that caused the Protestant Reformation.
Right.
But they were always given freely.
Correct.
But some people decide to scandalize this and sell them. So.
And a lot of times what happens in the church isn't the official teaching of the church. It's someone has done something who's part of the church, and then the whole church takes the blame for it too. So do your and Bergsma's book, I can't recommend it enough, especially that chapter on confession and indulgence. So
it was
cool.
Very good. All right, so we'll see you all here next time here on Question.